Welcome to East Lansing City Council meeting, regular meeting, Tuesday, April 19th, 2022. We'll open with roll call.
Councilmember Babcock.
Present.
Councilmember Brookover.
Here.
Councilmember Watson.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Gregg.
Here.
Mayor Bacon.
Present. Next up, item 1.2, approval of the agenda.
I move approval of the agenda.
Well, I sent an email to the mayor. Did you guys see that today? I'm asking that agenda items 3.8, 3.9, and 3.11 be taken off the consent agenda for separate consideration and vote, please.
And I accept the friendly amendment.
Thank you.
Would you repeat the line
Sure.
items?
Sorry. 3.8, 3.9, and 3.11.
Councilperson Babcock, you accepted the friendly amendment?
I do, thank you.
All right.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I'll look for item 3.1, approval of the minutes and closed session minutes. Council special budget work session, April 5th, 2022. Regular council meeting, April 5th, 2022. City Council special budget work session, April 12th, 2022. City Council discussion only meeting, April 12th, 2022.
I move the approval of all of the enumerated minutes and closed session minutes.
Look for a second.
Second.
All right, rest of you guys get on the ball.
We're making ourselves useful.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Let me just interject. Don't the closed session minutes have to be listed separately? I don't see them listed.
Just 1 second. They don't need to be for purposes of an approval motion, though.
Well, they're not listed at all. So they're nested within the discussion only minutes? Is that the idea?
I don't think they're considered separate minutes. They're considered the same as a part of the regular business meeting. We maintain the minutes separately. We have a document
Okay.
that's separate that we maintain a record of them.
Point well taken. I just wanted to make sure. Thanks.
That's as far as I believe, right?
All right, where do we leave off at?
Did we vote?
Yeah, I think we did. Yeah.
All right, motion carries. On to item 2.1. All written communication received by City Council are posted to the online agenda packet, and this is all written communication received before 4 p.m. on the day of the meeting. Next up, we'll have communication from the audience. As you approach the podium, would you please fill out one of the blue forms so we can keep track? Oh, here they come. Thank you. All right, up first, budget recommendation, Gabriel Biber.
Thank you, Mayor Bacon. Thanks for pronouncing my name correctly. Greetings, council members. I realize it's sometimes more customary to hold comments specific to later agenda items to later in the meeting, so I appreciate you being willing to hear these comments now due to a scheduling conflict. Again, I'm Gabriel Biber, been a resident of East Lansing for about 4 years now. I've also been executive director of Haven House about 4 years, and I've been with that organization for almost a decade now. Also wanted to let you know that our board president, Christopher DeRose, lifelong East Lansing resident, had hoped to be here tonight, was not able to. Both of us do plan to attend the meeting in May with the next public hearing and the vote on the CDBG budget. I just wanted to briefly say to all of the council members, thank you for considering the budget as proposed for the CDBG expenditures. I just wanted to point out that Haven House continues to play a crucial role in addressing not just homelessness services, but also housing and security issues in our community, helping to meet critical needs there. We strive to do all of that through an equity lens, to borrow a comment of Mayor Bacon's, and really for us, serving all families who not only experience homelessness but come at risk of homelessness is really what we're all about. Our identity as an organization since 1983 has been strongly rested on being an emergency shelter for families, but those outreach services and prevention services are increasingly part of what we're doing in terms of serving the community in an expanded way. I also want to point out that we couldn't do it without partnerships. In particular, Capital Area Housing Partnership, Capital Region Housing Collaborative, other local shelters with whom we collaborate very closely, and other agencies like Tri-County Office on Aging, Community Mental Health of Clinton, Eaton, and Ingham counties, et cetera. A couple of the strategic goals of Haven House, which are particularly relevant, I think, to the East Lansing community and to this funding. One of those is to lower barriers to shelter access and services, both physical barriers as well as programmatic barriers in terms of rules that sometimes cause problems for clients in terms of making it more difficult to stay in shelter or receive services. And also to identify and address any adverse disparities, not just in access to mainstream resources and homeless and housing resources, but also any adverse disparities in our program outcomes. This is all really done not just by having bricks and mortar, but by having trained staff. Staff who are balancing compassion with empowerment in terms of our values and are really staying up to date on best practices. Yes, we're a nonprofit, we're a charity, but we're deeply rooted in social science and best practices. So the specific use of the funds which we've requested is for staff, direct compensation of staff salaries. That's really kind of the heart and soul of our organization in terms of meeting our clients' needs. At this very moment, just a few hundred yards down the road at Haven House at 121 White Hills, 7 families are temporarily lodged. Over the course of a year, we typically see right around 100 families comprised of about 400 individuals actually receive shelter there, in addition to the sometimes as many as 100 families we serve per year through those outreach and prevention services. So I just wanted to, again, thank Council for considering the recommendation and let you know that we do look forward to the opportunities that that funding presents us to further serve families. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll sit down if there's no questions.
Paula Hatchett.
Thank you. I came back today because I wasn't sure that my letter had been seen by you. I'm here to speak to the request for a rental license for 755 Berkshire Lane. The point I wanted to make and that I made in my letter was that Berkshire Lane, which is a one-block cul-de-sac, has 12 partials. 7 of those partials are duplexes. 5 of those partials are single-family homes. So we have no problem with rentals. We're retirees and we're working-class people. What our concerns are the conditions that we have to live with when it comes to rentals. We've managed to maintain a community-type environment with well-cared-for homes in the end of the cul-de-sac, which is where the 5 single-family homes are located. There are 2 duplexes that are owner-occupied. The residents who rent those properties have been families, and they've been good neighbors. Our concern is that if you let a rental license for this single-family home, that you start a trend that will result in the whole block becoming rental properties. I'm not going to be moving anytime soon, so I have a reason to be really concerned about that. So I've made that point, and I want to take the next 3 minutes to tell you how wonderful I think it is to be an East Lansing resident. I came here in '73 as a graduate student. When I moved off of campus, I lived in apartment complexes and duplexes. In fact, I lived around the corner from where I live now in the duplexes when they were first rented. I have never had any difficulties living in this community. Where I live now, people have been very supportive, very welcoming. When I walk the neighborhood, people get to recognize you and they take the time to stop and speak to you and to welcome you to the neighborhood. I know you don't hear that very often, and that is the reason why I wanted to make that statement. Because I told people a long time ago, I should have written to let you know what a wonderful life I've had here in East Lansing. My neighbors are wonderful. When I need help, they're there. When they need help, I try to reciprocate. So what we're asking for here is to maintain our little community in a way that will support more of a residential type environment like the one we've had all along. Thank you very much.
Thank you. In-person comments? Anyone in the online queue?
We do not have any callers on the line.
Thank you. Next up, communication from Mayor and Council. Councilperson Brookover.
No, thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilperson Babcock.
Yes, my favorite subject. It is free yard waste pickup again. Yesterday was for the east side, next Monday is for the west side, and it goes back to the east side and comes back to the west side. In my neighborhood, we have quite a rivalry. My neighbors are fantastic gardeners. Their yard is beautiful. There's birds and wildlife. It's really lovely. And they already have 3 bags out, which means I really need to get to work this weekend because I can't be bested by the Quinns yet again. They always, once I got more waste bags out than they did, but I think they snuck out the next morning because they always take phenomenal care of their lawns. One of the things I love best about East Lansing are not only the people, but the way people garden, and I'm sort of a yard snoop as I go through the neighborhoods. So that's one thing. The second thing is the annual, is Director Shelley here? I'm going to mess this up. The library's annual auction is online. There are some phenomenal things that you can bid on. Books, bids, and bites, although I don't think we're doing bites because it's virtual again this year. But the library is another one of our wonderful community jewels, and I encourage everyone, after they finish putting out their free yard waste, to go online and bid.
Councilperson Watson.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Gregg.
I'm good, thanks.
Few things here. All right, to my notes here. First, I want to speak to upcoming job fair for the Aquatic Center. This will be April 28th, Thursday, 2:30 at Okemos High School. Doing applications and information, and I think at that point I'm going to make the effort to I know we have a lot of openings all over the place, so anyone else who has openings that are available to young people, please try to get included in that jobs fair, because this is the relaunch of the Aquatic Center. We want it to be a great success, and we'll probably have a much higher level of success if we can fully staff and get that whole cohort of workers in at the same time and kind of getting used to the new way of working and all the things with all the new stuff out there in the Aquatic Center. A lot of effort's gone into improvements during this time. You're going to be really excited about it, so we're excited to welcome you back to the Aquatic Center. Second, I just want to give a few acknowledgments to some of the social things on the consent agenda coming up here. Around the Armenian Genocide is one, and obviously, history does repeat itself, but it does rhyme, and we're sitting on the precipice of more genocides in the world, and we're facing them again. So I want to just acknowledge the acknowledgement of this on the consent agenda, and just make sure that we are awake and continue to be the welcoming community, because we do understand why people flee, why people look for safe places to come to. And I'd ask that East Lansing continue to be one of those safe places and a landing place for people who are afraid and fear their life. And it's just, that's the American way, and that's what we want to represent here. I also want to acknowledge Arbor Day. I'm not great at this, but I know this is an important part of our environmental nature as East Lansing, finding ways to be more renewable, plant a tree, do those types of things around the Arbor Day celebration, and hold me accountable. I've gotten really good at recycling. It used to be an issue, but I'm really good at it now, and separating stuff and washing stuff, and I think I'm a partner now. And then I just want to mention as well, Acknowledgement of Ramadan, as well as my participation in our partnership with Lansing for the Ramadan celebration at the Lansing Center on May 20th. Myself and Mayor Shore will be doing a PSA along with whatever other support we can provide to the celebrations for it to be a great success. And I just want to acknowledge Ramadan. And then I didn't have this fully, and I tried to warn it for either if Kathy or Elaine. I'm also a member of the MLK Commission. We have an art installation going in the building, and I just wanted someone to speak to it real quick on my time and tell the community the timeline, Elaine or Kathy or whoever wants to do it. Sorry. Yeah.
I didn't see Kathy. I was going to. So right now, we're working with the Broad Art Lab and the MLK Commission to put together the timeline. We're expecting that the exhibit is at least going to run through May 20th. Our hope is to have it installed next week. The Department of Parks, Recreation, and Arts have agreed to provide gallery wall space on the second floor of this building, so it'll be here. We had, I think, 20 art. I think it was 20 different entries into the art contest. We awarded in 3 different areas for middle and high school, and then for an adult winner, they'll receive a cash prize. Please stay tuned for an announcement about an open house and when the exhibit will open here. And that's all I know right now.
Thank you. And I want to thank the City of East Lansing for always being an excellent partner with the MLK Commission around different events and fundraising, scholarships, and everything else. And it's really a seamless partnership over the years, my time being on the MLK Commission. I really appreciate George's involvement and support and continued support. It's been unfettered with East Lansing and uninterrupted, so I thank you for that. I think that's all I had. I guess that was plenty. Next up, City Manager's Report.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one brief item, and that is to introduce our new Humphrey Fellow. Uzma, if you want to stand up briefly and just give a little wave. Uzma Ali is our Humphrey Fellow. She is doing a professional affiliation with the City of East Lansing for the next 6 weeks. She's a Humphrey Fellow at Michigan State University and is from Pakistan, where she is a mid-career professional in the area of human resources. So she'll be joining us in these meetings and in other meetings throughout the city. So welcome to Uzma. Thank you. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
All right. Item 2.5, City Attorney's Report.
I have nothing to add.
We move on to column 3, consent agenda, in lieu of removal of item 3.8, 3.9, and 3.11.
Agenda as amended.
I'm going to just jump in.
You can do the readout.
Yeah, I'll just go ahead and read it. So we have the following items on the consent. Jumping the gun on me there, Councilmember. Stealing my thunder. Item 3.1, approve the following appointments or
Really,
reappointments.
George, it's really one of the high points of my week.
This is a high point of my night.
To have you read this without messing it up somehow, and I'm sure your staff feels exactly the same way I do.
I'm ready to go. I'm ready here. So 3.1, approve the following appointments or reappointments to boards or commissions. A, Alan Conceicao to the Arts Commission for a partial term ending December 31st, 2024. B, Christopher Wardell to the Arts Commission for a partial term ending December 31st, 2022. C, Laura Jones Pettit to the Arts Selection Panel for a partial term ending December 31st, 2022. D, Rebecca Sam Larson to the Housing Commission for a full term ending December 31st, 2024. 3.2, approve a resolution celebrating Public Service Recognition Week. 3.3, approve a resolution recognizing April 24, 2022 as Remembrance Day of the Genocide of the Armenians. Item 3.4, approve a resolution proclaiming April 29, 2022 as Arbor Day in the City of East Lansing. Item 3.5, approve a resolution acknowledging the month of Ramadan. Item 3.6, approve a contract with Anderson, Fisher and Associates Incorporated in the amount of $267,507.90 to remove and relocate a portion of the northern tier trail along the Sanderson Drain and authorize the city manager to sign. Furthermore, allocate an additional $50,000 for a project contingency. Item 3.7, approve a contract change order with Top Notch Tree Care LLC for the tree services contract in the amount of $150,000 and authorize the city manager to sign. Item 3.8 was moved to the business agenda. Item 3.9 was moved to the business agenda. Item 3.10, table the consideration of approval of an initial rental license application for 501 Virginia for a conditional Class 3 rental license allowing up to 2 unrelated persons or a family to occupy the dwelling. The applicant is Monica Sagny, Bloomfield Hills, Michigan. Item 3.11 was moved to the consent agenda. Item 3.12, approve policy resolution 2022-6, a resolution to update the city loft policy regarding loft-type beds in dwelling units. Those are all the items on the consent agenda for council's consideration.
So moved.
Look for a second.
Second. Councilman.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. On to item 4.1, public hearing, consideration of City of East Lansing Community Development Block Grant, 2023 budget.
I don't believe we have a presentation at this point, Mayor, so if you just open the public hearing, and then obviously staff can answer any questions if there are any.
All right, at this time, I'll open the public hearing.
Good evening. My name is Carl Bonadono. I am the Nutrition Director at Tri-County Office on Aging. And I wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you so much for your support of our Meals on Wheels portion of the CDBG grant. Now more than ever, with the cost of goods and services going up at exponential rates, it makes a difference in us being able to help minimize food insecurity for our senior population. Been with the program for 9 years and have been able to see firsthand the benefit by delivering meals to seniors in our community. So again, thank you so much for your support. It means a great deal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more public comment?
Hello, everyone. My name is Brian Doyle. I'm with Eve Inc. And reflecting the statements of the previous speaker, just wanted to thank the City of East Lansing for considering Eve's request that we've put in. The epidemic of sexual assault and domestic violence continues in our community, and that's not a community that's divided by geographical borders. It is all throughout our society, and the monies that we receive from the city will help us continue to bring top talent into our spaces to provide basic services for survivors. And that's what I have tonight. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Further public comment? There's no further public comment. I'll now close the public hearing. Do we need any other action to move that forward, or just move?
We don't need any action. Is anything else from us at this point, Matt? No.
Okay.
That's it. Thank you.
All right. We'll move on to the business agenda, item 5.1, discussion of a request for a Testio, North American seeking personal and real property tax abatements from City of East Lansing to assist in their creation of their North American headquarters.
My name's Adam Cummins. I'm the Community and Economic Development Administrator with the city. So tonight before you is a discussion on a request from Testio. Been practicing all day. North America seeking personal and real property tax abatements from the City of East Lansing to assist with their creation of a North American headquarters. And tonight we have the Lansing Economic Area Partnership here with us. We have Keith Lambert and Dylan Rush who will be presenting on the project. If you guys want to take it away.
Thanks, Adam. My name is Keith Lambert, Chief Operating Officer and head of our business attraction team with the Lansing Economic Area Partnership, LEAP. Mayor Bacon, council members, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here before you today, where hopefully you associate LEAP with exciting, interesting things that we bring before the City of East Lansing. I think tonight is another one of those special moments. And what we're talking about is something that we really think is going to be a big impact for the region, the state of Michigan, and also the U.S. in this case. Our region has been historically poor at new-to-market business attraction, attracting companies that don't already have some sort of presence here. It's really slowed our economic diversification versus some of those other capital regions with Big Ten universities across the Midwest, thinking about Madison, Columbus, communities like that. Our team in recent years, based on all of our partners across the region, has really changed this. And we've landed a variety of nice projects, including Glambia in St. John's, an Irish company, Norm Fasteners in Lansing, a Tesla supplier, a Turkish company there, McKesson in Delhi Township, and earlier this year you may have heard about the battery cell plant in Lansing and Delta Township. So we're really hit our stride, and this is kind of the first opportunity we're bringing before the City of East Lansing, a true business attraction opportunity in the City of East Lansing. The prospective opportunity we're talking about today is foreign direct investment. And when we think about economic development, this is very much the top of the pyramid. All the economic activity that comes from attracting foreign direct investment is brand new to East Lansing, brand new to the Lansing region, brand new to Michigan, brand new to the United States even. Testio is a global leader in automotive drivetrain technology and testing. They're headquartered in Germany. They work with automotive OEMs in pre-production stages to develop and test drivetrain systems for new vehicle models. So they're working with Fords and GMs and Stellantises, BMW, Volkswagen, typically 2 to 5 years before a model comes out to make sure that its drivetrain is rigorously tested and top of the line for that new vehicle launch. The lead came from the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, a very close working partner of LEAP. I was actually with Vlaco, the European attraction manager, in Germany in November when they had the meeting set up with the CFO. The company has been looking at the opportunity to expand in North America for some time, approximately the last year. And over the fall months, they were really looking at the Detroit region primarily. And we knew we had very strong competition from South Carolina based on where a lot of the company's existing client relations, customer relations were. So we were able to help them see the opportunity in Michigan, get connected, and after that visit in Germany in November, they came to visit the Lansing region in early December, and we were able to get them connected with the College of Engineering at Michigan State University, the Lansing Community College, Capillary Michigan Works, and really just show them all that Michigan can offer. As part of that, we also went through a real estate site search process, and out of that emerged a really nice building in the City of East Lansing. So we were able to successfully pivot and kind of shift their gears and help them see that the Lansing region can be more cost-effective, have a great talent pipeline, even versus the Detroit region, and also can compete with Ohio and South Carolina from a talent perspective and a cost of doing business. We supplied a variety of data and began structuring a business support proposal, including prospective local and state incentive programs that the company's project would be eligible for and help us compete with those out-of-state other location considerations. Earlier today, MEDC leadership approved a business development program grant, which requires demonstration of local government support in order to move forward. That state grant, combined with job training credits and grants, and this 198-328 combo before you that Dylan will outline a little bit more in detail, is really pivotal in order to push this company and influence this company's decision to invest in the United States and have them choose Michigan, which is our goal at the end of the day. In order to proceed, the opportunity necessitates consideration and approvals from the City of East Lansing that sufficiently de-risk the company's substantial investment into this project, which again will be their significant beachhead for all of North America. A Public Act 328 exemption is required in order to provide assurance that Adasteo's investment into machinery and equipment is not taxable. It is Leap's and Miller Canfield's opinion that much, if not all, of Adasteo's personal property investment, their machinery and equipment, will already be tax exempt based on the statute for eligible manufacturing personal property, but it falls into a gray area with definitions, and thus the 328's a very important assurance for them from the local government. They don't really understand property tax. It's not a thing in Germany. Typically, companies are taxed very highly, but based on their profit. So they don't understand the disincentive of why they would be taxed on the machinery and equipment. So that's been something that we've been educating on, but that's part of the request for the 328. Public Act 198, industrial facilities tax abatement, is required in order to mitigate operating costs for the newly launched facility, which is an existing building today. That investment is only about $700,000, and the scope of the incentive, that's a true financial incentive, but the scope of it is relatively small. It's about $4,000 a year of City of East Lansing taxes that you would forego while also receiving that same amount as a 50% abatement. So a few important things to note. The project with these local supports will not impact current tax liability of the existing building. Rather, real property taxes generated by the new investment will be cut in half, meaning that East Lansing stands to gain that approximately $4,000 while also foregoing the same amount. The average new income tax revenue is over $20,000 a year, projected over 10 years. So the new tax revenue gain would be about $24,000 a year, with, again, foregoing about $4,000. These are good high-wage jobs and a landing pad for MSU and LCC graduates, exactly the kind of project that will help diversify and grow East Lansing's tax base, and a very nice way to contribute to the automotive industry and the future of electric vehicles, which is mainly what this company is working on, is EVs now, and helping to make sure all the OEMs are getting it right from a drivetrain perspective. Time is of the essence, as the company is eager to hire their key director role for the U.S. market and solidify their long-term lease agreement. We appreciate your consideration and really look forward to the discussion. Dylan will now walk through some of the additional project figures and details.
Thank you, Keith. Before I get into the project details, I just do want to touch upon in your package, the Why East Lansing slide, if you wanted to jump to that one. Thanks. As they consider Michigan and Ohio and South Carolina, some of these things stood out to them in the visit Keith mentioned back in December, and are critical in their business case analysis. And I think it's important to mention, considering the potential partnership going forward here. They loved MSU, loved everything about it. The visit to the College of Engineering, talking with Satish specifically, and a professor over there, was phenomenal. Same deal with Lansing Community College, really feeling the ecosystem on the talent side as it relates to the auto industry is a pivotal piece of information for them as they consider. You tie that into the central nature of East Lansing, of the Lansing region, proximity to current customers, but also openness to new customers, given our industry makeup here, and of course accessibility to customers throughout the Midwest for new lines of business. All in all, especially touring to the 3400 West Road building, love the automotive spirit, and that's something to take into account when they're thinking about a 10
15, 20-year lease here in the city of East Lansing for the North American headquarters. Just wanted to make sure we covered that point on the slide. Now getting into the actual project details, Keith talked about a lot of the narrative and the specifics. For this potential project, they are looking at an approximately 35,000 square foot building lease on a long-term basis, 10 years as a base. The building that they're eyeing in East Lansing is around 28,000 right now. So they would invest approximately $700,000 into that building. Well, that $700,000 would come in the form of an actual footprint expansion, 5,000 square feet or so onto that property, and also adding a couple thousand square feet functionally on the interior. And that's how they were able to get up to that 35,000 if we do move forward with that building there. So that's 700,000 real property investment that will tie into the industrial facilities tax exemption request I'll mention here in a second. As Keith mentioned a little bit about the actual testing operation, it is machinery and equipment intensive, as you can imagine, with all these drivetrains. Over the first 5 years, they'll be investing $26 million approximately into their equipment. Notably in the first year, $16 million, and obviously filling that gap in the first 5 years with possibly further investment beyond that, as many of these systems require a lot of updates and tweaks. So it's really an ongoing long-term investment project for them. On the workforce side, 46 jobs is the ramp up over the first 3 years of operation at great wages, around $33 an hour. If you do some math there, it's around $65,000 to $70,000 salary plus benefits. These are engineers, these are technicians, mechanical technicians, acoustic technicians. If you know what that is, we learned a little bit about that, really interesting stuff. Really cool jobs, highly skilled opportunities for our community here and for our talent coming out of our educational institutions. Of course, understanding those investment numbers and simply the fact that this is the entrance potentially into a North American market, a lot of cost risk reality circumstances are being taken into account, especially between Ohio, Michigan, and South Carolina. Particularly with South Carolina as consider a lead competitor. Labor costs are substantially cheaper there and often easier to find. Combine that with a really good relationship they have with a customer in South Carolina who's wheeling and dealing them to try to get them in their neighborhood understandably. So a double whammy, looking at the cost risk reality on the labor side and the relationship side in South Carolina. On the facility side, they do have a footprint from their parent company in Ohio. So when we talk about construction time and the build out, obviously hiring time as part of that, lead time is very important for this project. And like Keith mentioned, time is of the essence, and facility construction matters on that front. Since they began this analysis as well, if you're paying attention to exchange rates, we learned they have adjusted quite a bit since the analysis started. Recently, it hasn't gone in the favor from euro to U.S. dollars. So the business case is becoming more and more of importance when it comes to the financial side of the equation. When we look at this project and the investment potentially from the perspective of the City of East Lansing, I want to shift to the direct impact in the next slide that you will see. And Keith mentioned a little bit just high level about these numbers with $700,000 into the building, with the employee income tax, and this doesn't calculate the corporate income tax either, or it doesn't calculate consumer spending or indirect construction jobs. This is just directly to your operating millage. With the new real property tax revenue on top of the base, you can expect about $37,000 over the next 10 years with a project like this coming to that building. The personal property, as Keith mentioned, that $26 million is likely going to be exempt under the eligible manufacturing personal property statute, and or the 328 exemption to be considered later on. The employee income tax has some conservative assumptions down there. You can dig into those. It's assuming a $65,000 salary, about half of the employees living in the city. That goes on throughout the term of the income tax as well. All things considered here with the investment, the cost-risk reality, the impact to the city, Adesteo is interested in this proposed request to enter into partnership with the City of East Lansing to justify some of these costs to really make the business case work for Michigan over Ohio and South Carolina. Keith mentioned them, the 198 IFT, Industrial Facilities Tax Exemption, that's the 50% reduction on the building increment, new increment. And then the 328, the personal property as an assurance to make the business case work. Both of these are regularly used across the state and are really pivotal for justifying the business case going forward. If you look at from your perspective, continuing on to the next slide, including the 198, the industrial facilities tax exemption, and the 328, you can see the total increment over 10 years coming out to about $225,000 for that 10-year time span, which just equates to the first portion of the lease. This is a long-term investment for the company. The value, obviously, after the first line item there, that $18,000 would then double after the first 10 years is up, as that increment would continue to be taxed at full value. Again, real property, personal property is 100% exempt likely, and then the employee income tax, not taking into account the corporate income tax as well, as that's a little more challenging to factor in for a variety of reasons. I do want to mention on the next slide that this is really a, excuse me, a comprehensive effort. Since the beginning, as Keith mentioned, we've worked months and months since November and December with many partners, specifically on the package for incentives with Lansing Community Colleges, Business and Community Institute, with Capillary Michigan Works, and of course the MEDC. You see the values there. The Michigan New Jobs Training Program is a really cool customizable training program to operationalize some of the training they need. So think of the quality or Six Sigma type training to get their workforce going. That can help fund that. Same as the Going Pro Talent Fund on and on-the-job training costs. Michigan Works in-kind support with hiring plans, hiring fairs, and then the MEDC Business Development Program grant, which is a flexible cash grant, milestone-based grant based on job creation contingent upon local support. There is that element for all state support that the local municipality does support the project as well. All those are lumped together into this comprehensive incentive package. What the next steps would look like, I know we're just introducing the project here and ready for questions here shortly. I wanted to lay out the process just so we're all clear here. There will be a public hearing. So this council would choose, if they do, to set a public hearing at the next meeting, May 10th, and that will be set for May 24th. There will be 3 public hearings because you have to create a district, an exempt district to house the 198 and the 328. Think of it like that. So there'll be multiple public hearings, there'll be multiple applications that can all be lumped into one night, full of activity on the May 24th council meeting where those public hearings will be held and a vote can occur to consider the district and then the 2 exemption applications. So that's all we have for you in terms of the project, in terms of the expected investment and job creation and the workflow going forward as anticipated. We're excited about the project, as Keith mentioned, and open to any questions about the project that you may have.
Questions or comments? Couple. Did you have? Yep, you're up.
I was just wondering, any approximate amount on the financial support from MEDC?
I'm hesitating to respond to that because I have not seen the final number. It was approved last night, and I can follow up with staff on that matter and go from there. I apologize, I don't want to say a number erroneously right now.
Yeah. Okay.
The GoPro Talent Fund and the Michigan Works support, that's the same thing, correct? They're both Michigan Works?
They are not.
Okay. What's the GoPro?
They're very similar. So Going Pro Talent Fund is through state organization, LEO, labor and economic opportunity funneled through the local workforce agencies. So Capital Area Michigan Works is the administrator for that. So that's reimbursable funds anywhere from $1,500 or $3,000 per head. If it's an apprentice, it's $3,000. The Michigan New Jobs Training Program is through the Michigan Community College Association. So it is housed at Lansing Community College, and their Business and Community Institute operates that and administers that.
Next question. Per its size, in the scope of the work they're doing, is there potential growth, or what's their kind of projected outside of the initial investment?
I can speak to that. So the company, has grown tremendously across its European operations, and they see this as the opportunity to really get deeper business interactions with the U.S. OEMs. And as part of that, and again, we talked about the 10-year lease. A 10-year lease is pretty unique in the industrial world, especially in existing buildings. Typically, it would be more like 3 to 5 years. So they want a 10-year lease up front with 2 5-year extensions. So they're looking at this as a minimum 20-year investment. And they anticipate it. It's hard to know for sure. But if they have success in the U.S. market, they would likely expand by year 7. And then again, at every 7 years, they would anticipate some sort of material expansion, needing a larger facility potentially, or investing in new machinery and equipment that becomes outdated relatively quickly, as EVs weren't even a thing people were talking about 7 years ago, and now it's 70 or 80% of the work that they are doing.
Kind of based on our housing market and the challenges in that, how did that capture number come for the income tax with the split between the 0.5 and the 1%? Where'd that number come from?
It was truly a conservative estimate, just from previous projects. We didn't want to overshoot, so we, given a lot of the focus on their talent pipeline coming from MSU and LCC, imagine a decent amount of young professionals who are looking to enter the workforce, working in a cool manufacturing environment like this in the R&D space. That's where we came up with that almost half and half split. Hard to tell, and especially with a new investment, there's no baseline from the company, but wanted to be relatively conservative and go with that 50-50 split.
It sounds like we need more workforce housing in the northern tier near this project.
Good opportunity.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Last question as far as the competitors, is South Carolina, is this Greenville? Who are we competing against in the South Carolina, and where's the Ohio-based line? This is just for my edification.
I'm not entirely sure on the Ohio location. The South Carolina one is that Spartanburg Greenville MSA.
BMW.
It's a relatively large MSA. That's primarily the competition in South Carolina.
They have a very large key customer in that area that you might be familiar with.
Got it. That's what I assumed. All right.
So I have a hobby of driving around and looking at vacant buildings on my days off. So I am familiar with that building, and it doesn't seem to be an industrial building. Isn't it former American Cancer Society building, or is that the one that's across the parking lot? Oh, okay.
So it was racing, high-tech automotive. It's a small, industrial one spot.
Okay,
That's the
I'm thinking of
warehouse.
the other one on the other side. Okay.
We should have put a picture in
No,
the
it
packet.
makes more sense because I had it envisioned as the not very industrial building. What type of traffic do they anticipate coming in? It's a nice sheltered little area. It's not going to bother anybody, but what kind of traffic do they anticipate coming in and out of there?
This isn't a typical distribution and warehouse facility,
Right.
so minimal truck traffic at all. It's really a shielded operation. Where they'll get these drivetrains in and they'll throw them on a rack and spend 6 weeks running them 24 hours a day, trying to break them.
Got it. So they're not racing in circles around the parking lot.
Think of it
Yes.
like boxes, and very concealed. A lot of this is IP and a lot of confidentiality to be considered.
So anonymous things coming in on semi-trucks being unloaded under seal of darkness and then being secretly tested. Got it.
We actually asked this question. Mr. Fehrenbach and I had the opportunity to visit with one of their corporate executives last week from Germany. He made a presentation, very impressed with the company. But we asked about noise, vibration, and that is something that is kept within cells within the operation. And engineers are outside of the cell and may not even need hearing protection, standing right adjacent to it. So there would expect no sort of offshoot of noise and vibration. And I could just think about one thing in terms of the opportunity here is coming back from COVID, we have this uncertainty about people returning to offices and how relevant is offices in the future. This operation is the type of thing you would want because it's high tech, it has a connection to MSU's pipeline to talent, but it also has people who need to be at work.
Right, you can't
because
work from home when
these
you're
are these are
testing
high tech
jets.
testing benches where it's a picture of a lathe with a machine spinning something, and the engineers are there watching it to make sure it's working. So it's quite a neat operation. Very impressed with it, but it is something that you think about the COVID recovery. This is not work that you can do remotely from somewhere else.
Excellent. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Councilperson Babcock?
I know you don't have an answer for this tonight, but something I would like to know before we get to our public hearing is whether these other entities are putting up money and whether they've already done it at that point or whether whether they're expecting us to go first. And I'd also like to know how much the partners put up. I'm a cynical person because I've seen a lot of these come down over the years in many different places, many other different places, where they're structured in a way that one entity ends up holding the bag. And I just want to make sure that doesn't happen to us. I do not think we are a supplicant community. I've lived in communities where we have had to do anything we can to get jobs or housing in the door. And one of the great things about East Lansing is that is not who we are. I guess that is the upside of our wealth and how fortunate we are. I do not want to see East Lansing engaged in a race to the bottom, quote, competing with other communities. I welcome this project and any project so long as it benefits East Lansing. So I'm very interested in how the others participate and whether they are expecting us to go first or what their plans are and also the level of their commitment relative to what you've shown us. Thank you.
Can one of you tell us, I think I understand from your written materials, but so what's the total gross East Lansing loss on taxes, et cetera, for the 10 years if we grant these things?
Well, I think the consideration, and that's an interesting question. I think the consideration is that there's everything to gain, frankly, competing against other locations where the baseline is set right now and everything is new investment. To summarize again, it's about $37,000 of real property increment over 10 years, where half of that would be abated. So if you're looking for an incremental difference, that's what I would land on. But again, that's still $18,000 more than the baseline here from where we're at right now.
I understand that, but so, and I understand what your job here is. So it's one half of $37,000. Is that correct?
Yes, approximately.
So that's your organization's best estimate of what the quote loss end quote is to East Lansing over 10 years, correct? If we didn't give the abatements.
Go ahead. City Manager.
I'd like to jump in on that just because the personal property is the much larger investment and we're abating that, but likely the state will be abating it before we ever get to it. So it's a question of whether that's abated, but that's a huge investment of $26 million, which will be taxed at the personal property rate. But the state is going to abate that. We are a backstop abating it. But what is the abatement value of the $26 million? I mean, I'm sure it's a tremendous number. So that's, but what, from the presentation, you see the state likely will abate that before it even gets to us.
Well, that's Leap and Miller Canfield's opinion, so I get that.
So I just want, I want to mention that that's the number.
And I appreciate that. And so what is that number that Mr. Lahanis just asked you about?
Again, an approximation for the personal property based on $26 million over, I think, 10 years. For all mills, it's about $2.5 million. That would be exempted over 10 years.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, just to answer Commissioner Babcock about the order for the partners, I assume you're talking about the MEDC grant and Michigan Works and Michigan Jobs Training Program, just to clarify.
Correct. And anyone else who is into this leveraged scheme. When we have these conversations, something that is often overlooked is the cost to the city. I mean, we'll have to maintain roads. We'll have to, I mean, there are costs whenever anything comes into the city, and that's not a bad thing. They're public goods, externalities, we bear them together, but the operative is together. And so I would be interested in hearing from Mr. Fehrenbach or the city manager at some point about the additional DPW costs and and also perhaps the environmental issues that come along with an industrial development. I'm not opposed to it, but I think a complete picture includes the costs to the community and the costs to the environment.
Understood. And I think those are very important questions, and I think the cleanest answer is that this is an economic development project as a way to help support those critical infrastructure
I understand
initiatives.
that, but they also have costs, and I'd like to know what the costs are. Thank you.
Right, understood.
And I can also just jump in on that Mr. Fehrenbach asked the question, when you have an industrial use, there's questions about, will there be chemicals, will there be treatment that has to happen at the site before it gets back to the waste stream, and can our waste stream absorb it? And the answer was, this is primarily electrical driven, so there are not chemicals stored, used on site, because of the fact that it is all testing electronics from machinery, not a chemical production or storage of chemicals. And that was a specific question about the wastewater impact and the storage of chemicals on site, which were both, it's more akin to a high-tech computer plant than it is to a chemical facility. And then, of course, for garbage and waste sanitation, commercial sites don't use waste from the city. So a candid notion would be from a public services, office use is usually very low in terms of public services because they have low service needs, and they typically don't use much in terms of water and those types of demands. They will be a very high power user, but that's a relationship they'd have to have with the Board of Water and Light in terms of the power to the power of the machines, and that's a conversation they're having separately with the Board of Water and Light, not with us.
Just, sorry, I keep interjecting. I do want to answer your original question about the other support programs and the timing. So like Keith mentioned, the MEDC support program has been approved last night, contingent upon local approval. So it's really a joint parallel path from the state level to the local level. The training programs, the Going Pro Talent Fund is an annual grant that opens up around the fall and would then impact the hiring for early 2023, assuming that they look to hire around then. So that's a competitive annual grant, October, November timeframe, in partnership with Michigan Works. The Michigan New Jobs Training Program is again, it's an application process. At the going through LCC's board, they have two waves of applications, summer and winter. And it'll fall likely in the summer one for consideration.
But we don't know how much MEDC approved last night.
I will get the final number and provide it to the staff. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming in the negotiation that the addition of the LG battery and all that's pretty attractive to them to be in this region though as well. Was that the vertical piece that kind of they got to be their draw, correct?
I think in general, they're they look at all the OEMs and what they're doing around the world. They have operations in China supporting the different OEMs operating there that have been in EVs long before European and US OEMs even. They consider themselves a leader in the EV space. So when they've seen all of the investment into EVs and commitments from the GMs, the Fords of the world, I think that really just solidified their need to be in the US and to launch this facility somewhere in the U.S. I'm not sure if Altium specifically was a trigger for them, but they're definitely looking at the overall investment landscape of EVs and the U.S. support for EVs.
Councilperson Watts?
Any mention of community programs like, I don't know, youth programs or paid internships?
Well, they're a German company. They invented the apprenticeship model. They're very interested in interacting. We talked about the LCC and MSU engagement that's already happened. I think that was a really important piece of the pitch, if you will, about the community, was that we have this talent pipeline from the technician right up to engineers in our backyard. And they felt like they'd be competing with a lot of other entities in the Detroit area and even some of the other markets. It's kind of a little bit of guesswork, but they felt very confident with the higher ed partners we have here. They're very interested in kind of creating pathways from the K through 12 arena as well, and working through that LCC program. That'll be customized training, so they would be able to bring people on and get a 6 to 8 week, potentially like a fast track training through LCC to be ready for one of the kind of the lower level technician jobs that are still paying, $60,000, $70,000 a year.
Thank you.
I just want to say, if there weren't any more questions, staff is going to continue to work with LEAP. We'll address some of the questions that were asked tonight, and this staff will also do a financial analysis between now and the public hearing. So
is the motion here for a public hearing to set the date certain for a public hearing?
We're not asking for any action tonight, so when we come back in 3 weeks from tonight, we would put it with a motion for a public hearing, and then council could decide to move forward with setting a public hearing at that time. Is that right, Mr. Fehrenbach?
Correct.
So no action tonight, except questions.
Thank you guys for everything, and be ready for the people of East Lansing. You know what this is. Be ready.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up, item 5.2, consideration of non-binding letter of intent from Convexity Properties LLC regarding the transfer of 341 Evergreen Avenue.
I move approval of the attached letter of intent, direct staff and the city attorney to initiate updates to the development agreement and brownfield plan for consideration by the Downtown Development Authority, Brownfield Redevelopment Authority, and Council.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Comments, questions?
I'm going to vote against the motion I just made, and I think the staff's done a wonderful job on this, and I think it's probably a good idea, but just as a matter of principle, I just like I would never advise a client to go into a real estate deal without getting a current appraisal. I just don't think it's a good way of practicing that we don't get an appraisal. I fully understand the appraisal may come in higher, and it may come in lower, but it seems to me that's a piece of data that we probably should have for these kinds of projects. I think this is a really good project, but for that reason alone, I will be voting against it tonight.
Okay.
Yep.
I will be voting in favor. I remember when I was on Planning Commission, and we had a number of different times that this project came forward in various ways to us. And I like the idea of moving forward and maybe hopefully finding a better fit developer for our vision for Building C.
Mayor Pro Tem?
I'm in favor of it as well. I wanted to get Mr. Fehrenbach's opinion about the the provision in here for the contiguous open space, there's an out for us here by providing a kind of an alternate location. And it occurs to me that the only alternate location that would meet the definition of being contiguous would be probably the Valley Court Community Center. But then that would have the effect of also limiting us on that site. So we're either, I guess our buyout option preserves our ability to use both sites either as open space or, because I think both of those are sites that we've talked about, certainly moderate income housing, and with all of the work that we're doing on the park, just public engagement and the big grant that we've got out right now, it seems like, I don't know. I guess, I mean, to Mr. Brookover's point, I do understand the desire to have an appraisal, but I think what it's worth is one question, and then what it's worth to us is a different question. So I think if we are comfortable with the price, then the appraiser, the appraisal is our own desire. So I don't see that as a reason to vote against it. But I guess, is there any other possible land that you see that we could use as a swap, I guess?
I think that the Valley Court Community Center property is probably the most likely, and it should be noted that our out really is inclusive of using that open space as part of a larger development project or a reconfiguration of the roadway. So to your point, I think that we have a lot more flexibility with having parcel C with no deed restrictions and having access to the Valley Court Community Center property, and can use that to really do a visioning process, include the community, and figure out what are the best places for these uses that are desired.
Okay. Cool. Well, that doesn't change my inclination to vote for it, so thanks.
Whose equipment's on that site now?
I'm sorry?
Whose equipment's on that site now?
That's actually the staging for our Public Works project in the
E.K. McKenzie.
McKenzie, yes. So that's the street and sewer project staging.
So it's our contractee?
No, so who is McKenzie?
McKenzie is the contractor that is doing the Glencairn sewer improvement project.
Yeah, so
they're our contractor.
Yeah.
They're our contractor.
Yes, they're our contractor, and then they have an agreement with Convexity to do staging.
So they're leasing the property from Convexity, though, not from us.
Right? Okay.
Wait, no minute.
She said correct.
Nicole's going to fix it. Oh, correct. Okay, we're good.
Councilperson Babcock?
Thank you. I have a few questions, and I have to admit my first thought was this is kind of like the O. Henry story, Ransom of Red Chief. If you go back far enough in time, it's a short story. I won't bore you. So my first concern is that if we buy this or buy it back, or if it becomes available for development, there is nothing in this plan that ensures that it will be low to moderate income development, which has been what we've wanted for that parcel all along. And a prior council that I was not part of worked very hard to ensure that parcel C would be developed for that. My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong because my knowledge on this is not complete, but my understanding is that we will pay $1.5 million to the developer to get out of a lease restriction that the city was part of creating when we worked with the developer years ago.
So the developers indicated that they're not moving forward with building C. So that is a con that I think I outlined in the presentation last week, that there is still a chance that if we deny this, that eventually things will change and they'll move forward with building C. If they do not build building C by, I think, March of 2025, then per our existing agreement, That property will transfer to the City of East Lansing, but it will transfer with the deed restriction that it cannot be developed for anything other than public open space. And we further have agreed that that would satisfy the city's requirement for the 25% housing diversity.
Right. So if we do nothing, I seriously doubt they're going to build Building C. I've always doubted whether that would come to fruition, but it could. If we do nothing, either they build the low to moderate income housing, or it reverts to us anyway for open space. When someone wants you to do something very fast, always think twice. So they sent us a letter saying we had 5 days to respond to their demand for $1.5 million, which included also their building plans, to get open space that would come back to us in 3 years if they didn't do what we think they're not going to do.
This is a conversation that started probably a year and a half ago when we thought that and suspected that they were not willing to move forward. At that point, we could not have come to any close agreement on what the value of it was worth. So we, at that point, backed away. We requested that they transfer the plans with the property so that that value wouldn't be lost. And if we wanted to have someone pick up those plans, there were at least some work done and we could get value from that. So that was our request, that they transfer the plans. But this conversation started a year and a half ago, perhaps, and at that point, the price was something that we thought was not realistic.
What was the price then?
It was in the, I believe we started in the 3 million range, but my memory gets a little hazy.
Yeah.
The one thing I would say, though, is this really is a starting point on a much more complex deal. And so this is really gauging the council's interest from a conceptual level that starts a process, which would include an update to the development agreement, which includes the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority, the Downtown Development Authority, and the city, as well as an update to the Brownfield Plan, which also includes those 3 entities. And then there's various and other documents related to those. So there'll be multiple decision points in front of the council and numerous boards over the course of the next probably three months. So this is really not a quick process. It's more of a kind of simple question that will cascade into a multiple document situation for your consideration.
For the institutional memory piece here, with the land reversion, who put the poison pill in? That was ours? That was our decision to stick that in there?
So we were the ones who, from my recollection of the negotiation, we requested that if they didn't move forward by a certain date, because perhaps we could tell that there wasn't, income qualified was not their first choice, that that building was not their first choice, that the land would come to the city. So that was a combination of questions from council. They wanted to counter and say that, yes, but you can only use it for open space. Because if we're donating the land to you, we're not going to let you use it for some other purpose. So that's what I recall as the conversation from years ago.
But, and then there was nothing in the negotiation regarding kind of maybe like a simultaneous when ground would be broken on which projects as far as?
Well, those were the dates. That was the trigger points for when they had to get permits and when they had to, if they didn't actually have any process, the land comes to us. So those were the drop dead dates. And those are the ones that are now a year and a half out, right?
So there are also some dates for when they need to pull permits and those types of things, but really the hard line is the producing the building and getting certificates of occupancy by a certain date. And that was originally in January of 2025, but due to COVID, there was an enforced delay of 6 or 7 weeks, so that's where you get to the March timeline.
Yeah, I know, that was just for the public, really. I kind of had a sense of it. But I do, in the negotiations, we have a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking on this stuff here now at this point, and that was a pretty weak hand. I don't know if I'm looking at it from that perspective, and us wanting to do affordable housing and that type of thing. I think maybe this is secondary, revisiting how we approach getting this.
And putting that easy of an out in it was sort of want or
Yeah, I
interest?
mean, just frankly, people will build anything in East Lansing that they can build as if they can. That was a tricky one, and I wasn't around for that time, but I've heard some of the conjecture since then of kind of how we got here, so.
I mean, even moving that development project forward was challenging because we know that the land sat there, the vacant bank building sat there for years and years and years. So they built a great project. They did a nice job. They did what they said on 2/3 of it, the bigger 2/3. It's this parcel that didn't materialize yet, but there is an out for them. And this is what we're talking about here is I think that to the question about income qualified moving forward, I believe we're much more likely to have something that we want to see, including income qualified, move forward by taking this step, because then we're in the driver's seat of being able to make that happen.
Yeah, we can impose the requirement in terms of any new project in terms of low-income housing, correct? We don't lose that variable at all. With all due respect to Councilperson Babcock, but in the interest of transparency, could you, Mr. Fehrenbach, or you, Mr. Lahanis, explain to us, let me know if my perception that the actual net cost to the City of East Lansing for this transaction is not $1.5 million.
So I put together some slides just to try to help explain. Maybe that'd be good. It'd be a good time to pull this up.
There's a couple slides that show what you're getting at.
So,
Councilmember Brookover.
if you wouldn't mind pulling those up. So when we originally went through the process of the brownfield plan, the developer's estimates for the reimbursement through the brownfield TIF, which is a little complicated because the DDA also negotiated in a retention of their capture. So I guess before I go there, I would say that the DDA, this property is in the DDA. Parcel C is not actually in the DDA, but parcels A and D, the hotel and the Abbott that are creating the tax increment revenues, are both in the DDA's TIF 2 district. And so as part of the brownfield interlocal agreement, the DDA retained capture on a certain schedule. But beyond that, the developer's estimates for repayment as approved really indicated a 9-year repayment process. And if you go to slide 2, you can see that their estimates turned out to be very conservative in terms of the valuation of the property. And so currently our estimate is that the plan will end in its 5th year. And I apologize, I think I said after 2023 in the presentation. It's actually after 2024. And you can see that after that, the DDA's TIF 2 district capture will kick in, and it'll be significantly higher, of course, than their current retention, but also because of the project, it'll be significantly higher than previous to the project. If the council moves forward, our expectations in slide 3 are that it will add 1 year to the plan and push off the DDA's capture district going back into effect for that 1 year. So the effect to the city and the general fund is really 0.
And of course, to your point also, we're only about 1/3 of the mills in total on this chart because of other jurisdictions. So that's the point you're getting at, is that if there's a full capture, the City of East Lansing's mills represent about 1/3 of that as actual East Lansing mills, the rest are for other jurisdictions.
Okay, so what's your best estimate of the net cost to the City of East Lansing? Not the DDA, because we're not the DDA, correct?
It's actually in the district, Councilmember Brookover. So if the TIF stops at that earlier year and we don't add this extra year, the money doesn't come to the city, the money goes to the DDA, but it would be the lesser amount. So we would be able to use a bigger portion, the full green bar, as opposed to the DDA would only get the orange portion. Is that correct, Mr. Fehrenbach? So the DDA loses a portion because those mills are not captured. So the money would go to the DDA a year earlier. It would be a lesser amount, but the city would not get any of it because it's all in the DDA capture district.
Okay.
So we're making use of more funds that otherwise would go to the DDA.
And in this scenario, we're extending a year, and so the practical effect of that is what?
that,
The practical effect would be the 1 year that the DDA would forego the revenues that they can then use within the DDA district.
Okay. And we are 1/3 of the DDA district, correct?
The mills from the city are captured by the DDA, but yes, that, they're about 30-some% of the overall mills.
Okay, so do you have, I know Mayor Pro Tem understands this, but do you have a dollar figure, a best estimated dollar figure at what we, the City of East Lansing, actually end up paying for this piece of property?
so the 1.6 million for that, 1.5 million, we would be about $500,000 in that year of capture. But you could argue even still that we're not foregoing it because it would go to the DDA instead of going to the capture. But that would be about the numbers, about $500,000 for that 1 year.
All right, thank you.
It's not an easy answer, but I understand the question, but it's just because of the DDA interaction, that there's another TIF underlying it, that makes it more complicated than.
I'm glad you understand the question, because I'm not sure I understand the question.
For the community's benefit, a third? Is that what you're
A
saying?
third.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's hard to have this conversation then without factoring in the DDA's ongoing and increasing debt. And last I knew, wasn't the DDA in debt to the tune of $5 million, and the cost of servicing the debt was about to subsume the entire DDA budget. So
I think the DDA certainly has approximately $5.1 million in debt that it's servicing with the full faith and credit of the city as a backstop on that debt. And currently, we have a payment structure that has a $110,000 principal payment, and then interest based on a variable interest rate. In 2 years, in its current structure, the payments, the principal will go up to $330,000 with that similar interest rate, and there's some other risk involved there as well. However, given the growth in the TIF 2 district, I think it is safe to say that the DDA can weather that storm. It's certainly something that we will take into account. But even with the growth, for instance, from the MSU Federal Credit Union building, and the potential to restructure that debt, and the potential for a project to occur on the Evergreen properties, I think that at least our initial estimates are showing that the DDA will still be able to provide some level of service in terms of the infrastructure and marketing and other types of projects. But that is definitely something that merits consideration, and something we will be looking further into as we go through this process.
The other thing I would note on that is this parcel being directly across from the Evergreen properties, and if it comes to the city unencumbered, then allows the city to create a larger project and solve more problems, which only makes the project more likely to go and more likely to be able to be financially viable. For instance, if there's parking that would need it on the Evergreen side, that is a challenge for that parcel to absorb because of the size of it and at that price. But if parking, for instance, could be done somewhere else on the Valley Court side on this parcel, in addition to housing, all of a sudden it's much easier to move those pieces around and to make a project go, which makes it easier for the DDA and the city to get that into a productive project. So I think it only helps the city.
true, but someone who's exceptionally cynical listening to this, and that's not necessarily me, would wonder if then we're paying $1.5 million for the opportunity to put a parking structure on something that could have been open space. I mean, and I realize it's just a hypothetical, but those are the kind of things that we haven't fully hashed out or thought through. At least I haven't as a council member. Perhaps others have. And I guess I didn't hear, if we extend that TIF for a year, how will that affect the DDA debt? Will the DDA be able to put money toward its debt or not?
I think that it's a simple Can you hear me? Sorry.
Go ahead, speak louder.
I think it's a simple question. It has a very complicated answer, and I think the short answer is I believe that the DDA can service the debt and still have a project development budget in place. It's a factor of a number of things that are subject to change, but I think that we have some very positive signals on the horizon, given the investment that's been made over the last 5 years in this district and its effect on their TIF2 capture district.
So basically, the growth in the DDA district has made it possible for the DDA in the future to service the debt. If we are stuck with the debt into perpetuity, the existence of MSU-FCU, the Graduate Hotel, and the Abbott in the future, long-term, give the DDA a lot more resources than they had in the past, which would help to service the debt into perpetuity, even if we did nothing with the projects likely. So that's a lot of moving parts, but that's where that's the reason for optimism.
And
for
I
the
would say
future.
that we will certainly be providing more of that context as we move through this process, if it's the council's desire to move forward.
What is the DDA's annual budget?
It's about $2 million.
1.4, 1.5. Jill, do you have that? Hold on.
$1.8. $1.6.
So how far would the 1.5 million go toward addressing the debt?
You mean in terms of the number 1.5 million?
Yes.
The debt payment was around $300,000 to $400,000. $300 now, $400 in the future.
Yeah. I think maybe Jill can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the debt payment for fiscal year '23 is estimated at about $250,000. Is that about right? And that's, again, for the next 2 years. We're similar to that, probably will go up based on rates and being in an adjustable. But again, we have some time and the potential now, I think, with the growth in the capture district, to look at potentially restructuring that and having more certainty around it, which is something we'll certainly look into.
Or perhaps they could pay down some principal if they get a big chunk of money.
Certainly can do that. I think we have the ability to pay down principal on the debt and in the way it's currently structured.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is complicated, obviously. I think the key here is long-term is the ability to grow. I think this is obviously large sums of money that we're talking about here, but I think being hamstrung in the ability to do the next moves, which both the city and the DDA will need to move forward with Evergreen and everything else that needs to take place. I think it's just more speaks to the urgency of doing the right things down the road here, and really perhaps even I'd ask from our legal counsel, just maybe we're strengthening how the language on these types of deals and that kind of thing. I imagine that's what it took to get the deal done at that time, and I remember the blight that area was for almost my entire time being here, so I'm happy something occurred there, or perhaps strengthening the legal language down the stretch on some of the next projects. And I know there's a lot of interest in East Lansing and in doing things here from a lot of different quarters. So yeah, just perhaps we shelter ourselves. It's easy from at this point to be a Monday morning quarterback, so to speak. So was there anything I kind of asked for a legal opinion for the public. Was there anything in the legal language or anything that we could let the public know?
I mean, from a legal perspective, the city's options here are very simple, because just like we've spoken about, we're very limited. In 2025, if Building C isn't complete, under the current circumstances, it'll come back to us with this very tight deed restriction for use as a public space, and it further defines public space as land reserved for parks, recreational areas, and scenic areas. And so it'll come back with those limitations. Alternatively, we have the proposal that Tom's just spoken about that's in the LOI.
Just as a matter of information, does it require that the land be contiguous? Because I've heard that said someplace else, and I...
So, again, going back to our conversation last week, the actual transfer of the land will likely occur for $1. And this is really the council's policy decision to look at the brownfield plan and allow for additional eligible expenses on building A, which is inside the current plan, to offset those costs.
I don't think you understand my question.
So his question
If we were to wait this out, and under the definition of, what is it, public land, council? Does our use of, to substitute something else for this, we've talked about the building at Valley Court, does that substitute have to be contiguous to this site?
So the alternative language within the document is, within the development agreement, is that parcel C may be built upon as a part of a larger development, or may be used to reconfigure adjacent roads, provided such development has, or the road reconfiguration provides, a contiguous public, open, and landscape space of the same size as parcel C, suitable for outdoor recreation and events. But that's, I think, what the pro tem and Tom were talking about, is whether there really is anything practical that could be done to satisfy those requirements.
In other words, it has to be right down in that geographic area. Is that
We can't
what you're
add
saying?
land, we can't add land next to Patriarch Park and have
Okay.
Patriarch Park
All
get
right.
bigger. It's got to be right there.
Thank you.
Can I also just take the opportunity to note that that this is would be a discretionary review and approval by the MSF board, and so we've been working certainly working with MSF staff, but it's not a guarantee that they would necessarily approve the brownfield plan amendment in this form. However, I think not having parcel C in this particular brownfield plan would give us, I think, additional flexibility to potentially use that tool down the line if we were to look at redevelopment of that site by itself, or with the Evergreen properties, or with the Valley Court Community Center, et cetera.
Forgive me, Michigan Strategic Fund?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Babcock, because I didn't know what it meant either.
Oh, I'm sorry. Too many.
Read it.
Too many.
It's very complicated.
Any further questions or comments? All right. I'll move the recommended motion.
It's already been moved.
Already up there. Okay.
It's been seconded, I think.
We already second moved. We're good to go. All right. I'll look at this time for a vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries 3-2. Next up, item 5.3, consideration of policy resolution 2022-7, a resolution supporting legal counsel's recommendation in the Hios versus City of East Lansing case.
I move that we adopt City of East Lansing Policy Resolution 2022-7, a resolution regarding Hios versus City of East Lansing.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Comments, questions, conversation? Yeah, we can, but just for the record, can we just kind of speak to the nature of this really quick for the public?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. So at the City Council meeting that we had last week, we did go into closed session as it relates to the matter of Hios v. City of East Lansing. The public will know that is the Board of Water and Light class action suit. And in that closed session, there were certain recommendations made by council for the city. And so the motion before the council this evening is to approve those recommendations of the attorney regarding litigation strategy moving forward.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous, motion carries. Item 5.4, discussion of city ordinance regarding parking ticket fees.
Thank you, council. So tonight we have for council consideration of parking fine recommendation. This is the first discussion on this item, and we're not looking for any action this evening. So as we talked about during the budget process earlier this evening, we talked a little bit around this issue of parking fees and what the city does in terms of paying for structures and incenting people to have the right level of parking. This is talking about meter violations and what those meter violations should look like. So the current issue for the city is that the parking meter fines currently provide a disincentive to park in the city's parking structures. So basically, we think that the level of parking meter fine is not sufficient to provide the right incentive or disincentive from illegal parking. So meter fines currently are $20. A $10 quick pay option exists. So what this means is that if you receive a parking meter violation, that you have an option by the next business day to come and drop and make your payment at a drop box and make your payment of $10 to address that ticket. So the ticket essentially would cost you as little as $10. We can see that from discussion today, structure parking has a $15 per day daily maximum, and that the Bailey surface lot is currently $20 per day daily maximum. We noted also from the conversation earlier this evening that 2 structures would be going to $20 as well. Next slide, please. In terms of background, the city operates nearly 250 parking meter spaces in the downtown. These are on street either at a pay station or a traditional parking meter. That includes 96 individual meters, 143 multi-space pay stations. These spots are generally limited to 90 minutes and are designed for rapid turnover. So the point of the on-street parking with this 90-minute limitation is to make sure that they're immediately available for patrons who want to come down and run into a store to use a service, pick something up, do quick shopping. So if it's for that quick turnaround, and that's why they have the 90-minute limit, and it's supposed to encourage people to have rapid turnover so that those spots are available for our patrons to come down and use businesses. And alternative to that is that we have the parking structures, which are of course suitable for short-term but also longer-term parking during the day. So currently, people who are looking to park over 90 minutes would certainly use a parking structure. That's where we have the $15 max for if you're in the system for 12 hours or more. And we mentioned before, for most in-demand structures, we are proposing an increase to $20 for the daily maximum. Next slide, please. So obviously our proposed change. Currently fine meter violations $20 discounted to $10. This fine has been in place since 2010. An ordinance change that we're proposing would update this fine to $30, discounted to $20 if paid by the next business day. So we believe that this tries to fix the situation where someone gets a generous discount for parking at the meter, getting a ticket, and avoiding the parking structure, whereby taking up our best spaces. So that's really what we're looking for here. We believe, again, that eliminates the financial incentive to parking all day during the meters and taking those spaces up. With that, certainly any questions or comments from council, and again, we would look to propose this as an ordinance change, which would need 2 meetings. It would need to be introduced at a meeting and then action at a following meeting. So this would be on the agenda for 2 more times before final action would need to be taken.
I'll throw to my personal parking advocate, Councilperson Watson, if there's any.
So I've asked before and been curious about an Amnesty Day. And part of that has to do with offering people an opportunity to pay or pay off their parking tickets. And so with these proposed increases, at what point are we not retrieving the money? Like, does it really need to be next business day that someone gets a discount? Because sometimes money is hard and people get paid like bi-weekly. And so again, my question is, when are people making payments, and how can we get ahead of that?
Well, for us, obviously, the incentive is to try to encourage people to park at the right level. So if they have to be there for longer than 90 minutes, or if they don't want to have to pay a meter, they pay a parking structure. So it really is trying to encourage people to use the right level of space. But as to your point, it is providing a fine or a penalty for parking in those spaces to discourage people overstaying the period or not paying the meter. So there is a punitive element to that, but that's in some way intentional to try to encourage the right level of parking. But the quick pay is really just trying to say, you get this quick discount to settle it right away so it doesn't have to go through a process that takes everybody's time. It doesn't take the court's time, it doesn't take everyone else's time. You've paid your fine and then we're done with it, but you get a discount. So it really is to try to encourage that rapid resolution of the ticket and help out the patron, but also help out the city by having it done quickly.
People don't get double ticketed, is it?
I actually asked that question. If you leave the ticket, I guess I'm giving inside information here perhaps, but if you're parking all day illegally and you pop the ticket off, you might get another ticket.
Say that again?
If you're parking all day illegally and you pop the ticket off and take it and put it in your pocket and leave your car there, you might get another ticket. If you leave the ticket on, you will not get another ticket. Generally.
Trade secrets. Councilperson Babcock?
Well,
Take the ticket off to go in and pay it in the
gotta-
short term, and then you go back and there's another
you
ticket.
got to move your car before you do that, or pay your thing, because I've seen people park illegally to come into City Hall to pay tickets, and you're eligible for a new ticket. So
Yeah. So I told Mr. Lahanas I'm going to throw shade, my Lansing parking ticket story, where I received recently notice of a ticket pre-pandemic. I don't know where you were the 1st December of 2019. I don't know where I was, but Lansing claims I was parking illegally. And I'm really good at those envelopes because I am cheap. And I know that if I get in there and pay them. So they're now threatening to take me to court. And I'm like, well, why now? They're like, because the courts have been closed. I said, well, I have 4 judges who'll disagree with that. Anyway, so East Lansing could be worse, I will say that. However, we did get an email that piqued my curiosity. Someone who was downtown East Lansing got a paper ticket and went to City Hall to pay his ticket quickly. And he was told, well, because it's not an electronic ticket, we don't have it, so you're going to have to come back. And he's like, well, then it will be after my window of opportunity to get the discount. And he was told basically, too bad, so sad, which it seems we could do better. Are we not writing paper tickets now and doing them electronically, or how does that work?
So what the person should have said was, you can put it in a Dropbox. The Dropbox is outside and it's available 24 hours. So if someone drops it, if you get a ticket on Friday and you drop it before Monday morning, it's considered 24 hours. So what the staff should have advised them to do is drop it in the Dropbox, and then it would have been accepted on time. So the staff, I think that has been corrected, hopefully, where they won't be giving that incorrect information. But I think there the staff just simply said the wrong thing.
So, second question to that question, would that preclude that person from being able to pay it via credit card? He would have to pay it either by cash or by check?
For the quick Dropbox, it is only by cash or by check, is my understanding.
Okay.
Yes.
Is that something that we could possibly, could we have somebody like write out their credit card number on the, I don't know.
You're exceeding my,
Okay.
this is the court process,
Yeah.
the court administers it, so I don't know if.
Just, I guess in terms of easing all of our payment options, as we've said before, and I think Councilmember Babcock is a great proponent of the online payment system.
Yep.
Anytime we can make it easier for people to pay, so if we can figure out a way for people to pay that quick fine via credit card, that would be a nice option to explore.
I can check with the court on
And who
that.
leaves an envelope of cash in a Dropbox?
I do.
People do.
Yeah,
I've been in Lansing for 30 years.
I actually
Well, you
pay
can have my ticket from the city of Lansing.
It's a secure metal box, and we have been
I
attached to
don't
City
doubt it.
Hall, so we have the police department right there, so we've been successful.
My Fenner donations in their little drop box when I'm there.
I have no doubt about the truthfulness or honesty of anyone who works for the city of East Lansing, but that it would just never occur to me to leave cash in an envelope in a box. So my second question is, we also received another email. It's just parking night. Well, perk up about parking, because everybody's got a story. I think my dad died with like 5 parking tickets from Lansing. Anyway, we received an interesting email this past week from a young man who parked on one of our residential streets, and it said no parking between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. or something. And he received a ticket at about 3 a.m. And so he wrote to us and said, well, why is this? And I have to believe there's something we can do. Apparently by challenging the ticket with the court, which was denied, ignorance is no excuse. Ignorance of the law is no excuse, I guess. He was stuck with having to pay the ticket, but our sign is clearly an error. So how many of those erroneous signs do we have out there, and what are we going to do?
So
kept looking at me, so I figured I'd just come up.
So
that specific case, we did a little research on that, and where that sign is marked on that specific street, it says no parking other than by permit from midnight to 2 a.m.
Okay.
So that's marked for that special reason in that area. On almost every entrance to the city, it's marked in a red and white sign that there's no parking on any city street from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. We took some pictures of that stuff. I do have some of that. If you'd like to see, I can send you some of those. But that specific case, it's marked specifically on that street because you're not allowed to park on that street between midnight and 2 a.m. without a permit.
Okay.
Is my understanding for that specific one.
Okay, I vaguely remember the red and white signs, but I also understand how people could forget, because if I weren't here at this moment, I wouldn't have been, it would not have come back to mind, so thank you.
There's no more questions or comments? No action required, City Manager?
I'll just look to bring it back next time, so thank you.
I have a few more questions.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Councilperson Watson?
Okay, so we talked about how, some of our parking structures are full. So do we see that with the parking meters, that some of the parking meters are full, and that's why we should raise the prices because people are staying too long?
You mean people are exceeding the 90 minutes or exceeding their meter time?
Yeah.
So, I'd have to ask our parking administrator that, because we're only looking at the issue of the fines. I'm not aware of if it's a problem if people, that's the 90-minute turnover, is to try to incent people to turn over, that they're not supposed to stay there beyond that time to keep that rapid turnover. So that's the intent of it, but I'm not sure.
Okay. Thanks.
Good?
Yep, thank you.
Thanks.
Next item, formerly 3.8, now 5.5. Approval of initial rental license for 331 Lexington Avenue for conditional Class 3 rental license, allowing up to 2 unrelated persons or a family to occupy the dwelling.
For purpose of discussion, I move we approve an initial rental license application for 331 Lexington Avenue for a conditional Class 3 rental license allowing up to 2 unrelated persons or a family to occupy the dwelling.
I'll look for a second. Moved and seconded. Discussion?
I'm going to vote against this motion. I have a lot of respect for the housing administrator and her task and for the Housing Commission. I just happen to respectfully disagree with them based on a review of the statutory basis, which we asked for. And I just cite section, Chapter 6 of the City of East Lansing Ordinances, Buildings and Building Regulations, including the amendments at Section 1005, Issuance of Rental Licenses. And the criteria under subsection 7 of that amendment, and subsection 7 is entitled Property Review Standards. I believe that there are 2 standards that apply here, and I believe those standards have not been met based on the comments we've received from neighborhoods and specifically from folks tonight and other times. And the ordinance says, no initial rental unit license, Class 1 license subject to review hearing by this section, or change in classification shall be permitted until the rental unit is found to be in compliance with the following. A, the rental unit is served adequately by essential public facilities and services, and B, the use of the rental unit does not cause traffic congestion or movement or on-street parking demands out of proportion to those normally prevailing in the zone in which the rental unit is located. In both of these situations, and I think in an increasing fashion as we add rental housing into neighborhoods, we in fact cannot serve the rental units adequately by essential public facilities and services because we are understaffed with our enforcement people, including our police force. And B, the use of the rental unit does not cause traffic congestion or movement or on-street parking demands out of proportion to those normally prevailing in the zone in which the rental unit is located. And I believe, again, that the incursion of additional rental housing in neighborhoods in which there is still some semblance of single-family home ownership invariably causes traffic congestion or movement and on-street parking demands out of proportion to those normally prevailing in the zone in which the rental unit is located. So those are the reasons why I'm going to vote against this specific motion and also the motion that will be made with regard to 755 Berkshire.
Question for the councilperson. Is this de facto to all present and future Class 3 rental licenses? Are we going to look at these individually? Or is there specific reasons around the parking structure? And I'm just confused on what the criteria.
Well, these criteria apply to everything. I mean, they apply to all the rental licenses they're applied for, but I'm just talking about these two that are before us.
No, I get it. I'm saying with similar, do we need a broader conversation around this? Is this an issue with the Class 3 license in general, based if it's disruptive to parking, or just these two specific?
I really don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I really don't know.
Okay. City manager?
Nothing to add. I think that I'd have to ask the administrator up to see if there's any other criteria or anything we could do differently. But at this point, I think it's just a decision for council.
Yeah, I'm just confused on the finer points of the objection. I'm okay if it has to be consistency across the board. We can't pick and choose across Class 3 rental licenses. So I'm making sure if we're creating new criteria, I think that's a different.
Let me say it this way. This is what the ordinance says. I believe that the system requires that the Housing Commission, the housing staff, the Housing Commission, and ultimately the City Council to consider this range of variables in these ordinances that I've cited. And so I think each rental license is entitled to a review based on those criteria. And so in these two specific situations, well, I'm going to talk about this one, at 331 Lexington, I just believe that the criteria are not met. I understand that many people may disagree with me, but does that answer your question? I mean, I'm trying. So each applicant, I think, is entitled legally to a separate consideration. The criteria stay the same for everybody.
Mr. Brookover, can I clarify? So with an occupancy of 2 people in this unit, you feel that that will create an undue traffic situation? Is that?
A licensed rental, yes.
Okay.
You've kind of stumped me. I guess we could do an up and down vote, but I think the question's process. Is it?
Well, I mean, I think we're going to have to vote on it. I mean, but I respectfully disagree with Mr. Brookover's point. This is a 4-bedroom dwelling. And I think that actually as a 2-person rental, it will have significantly less potential traffic than if it was occupied by a family. My family has 3 cars, and we've got 2 kids that are going to get their licenses within the next 2 years, and we'll soon have 5 cars, and I have no idea where we're going to put them. But if my house had a Class 3 rental, it would be limited to 2 occupancy and considerably less traffic. So for my purposes to vote on this, I do not see that as a reason to vote nay, so I will be voting yes.
And just so I'm fully understanding, is the secondary issue is enforcement, Councilperson Brookover?
Yeah, I just don't think at this point on some of these, we have the necessary employees and ability to enforce the rental license setup.
Councilperson Watson?
I was curious, when we were talking about the fraternities and sororities, there were some property managers that came forward, like one of them that offered working into the lease noise and litter. And so is that something that we can ask of new people that are renting out their properties? And maybe that's a question for council or...
Well, I mean, the ordinance that's available to you, it says, in part, the owner and the legal agent, so that would be a property manager, demonstrate sufficient ability to maintain and monitor the use of the rental unit to ensure that the proposed rental unit does not deteriorate with regard to internal and exterior maintenance, does not accumulate trash or rubbish, or does not become the situs of public nuisances defined by a different statute. So, I mean, I think part of your question is already in the ordinance. And I guess my experience is, I'm not a real estate attorney, but my experience is those lease terms are negotiated between the people. I actually think there's a model lease. Yeah, there's a model lease in East Lansing that's generally speaking used by everybody who has a rental license, and then they may add things to it. They may add additional criteria to it. But so at least my experience, because I've represented kids that have been renters, is that the landlords have a model lease that is fairly onerous in terms of the responsibility of the renters. The question is, how do they enforce it? So I think that kind of answers your question.
I see a binder.
Code that Councilmember Brookover is referring to, just to be sure. I had the sections he was going to be quoting, but I was going to say pretty much covered that. There is an East Lansing lease addendum that does speak to noise, litter, many of our common ordinances that possibly as a first time, if a tenant happens to be a first time tenant in the community, might not be aware of, and those are to be attached with every lease in the city. So it is a bit of an educational document, and hopefully they would get that through that.
I think secondary to what Councilperson Brookover was saying, if there are challenges with enforcement and staffing, like every other department, that'd be something maybe to discuss as a different thing. I can't see how I can selectively enforce, rules for one and not for the other. That's what I'm kind of wrestling with here. But maybe that's a broader conversation down the road.
Okay.
Further discussion?
I guess I just have a personal opinion that I want to put into the conversation. I think that we have, as residents of East Lansing, we have a knee-jerk reaction when we hear the word rental, and we assume that it's going to be a student rental. We also have things like our Class 3 ordinance, which limits it to 2 unrelated people to guard against having these huge occupancy student houses. But unless we have some roadway to having rental units in neighborhoods with family occupation,
then we're cutting off one road to access for people of moderate income to live in the city of East Lansing. So as we're talking about moderate income housing, we're talking about rental assistance, down payment programs with our DBG conversation. I think that we have to also acknowledge that there is a population of people who cannot own, who will not apply, will not be able to apply for rental assistance or for down payment assistance, but who desire to live in East Lansing and are going to rent their homes. So I know that there's no way that we can guard against having a student family move into that dwelling, but unless we make some houses available in family neighborhoods for rent, then that's something that we have taken off the menu in terms of moderate income housing. So I know it's scary, but I think that fear is not a reason to vote these down.
Well, just for the record, Mayor Pro Tem, that is not a fear that is part of my calculation in opposing this, so just for the record.
Well, I also wanted to say, I've mentioned this before, but I live around all renters, and I've questioned the imbalance and the concerns with the renters, but I've learned from our conversations too, there's an accountability issue with who's held responsible when I can't sleep at night because somebody's music is too loud, or the people next door are, too loud, and there's a number of them next door that can create that noise. Or when people walk outside in the morning and there's glass around properties or around sidewalks. And so I'm learning from the conversations that we're having about things. And I also want to say, I've talked also before about my search for a place to rent with my 3 children, and I don't believe our houses are rent affordable for families. Someone like me, single income with 3 kids. Those houses were created for duplicate people that can bring in duplicates amount of income. There's a cat in here. Where did the cat come from?
I know this cat. Yeah, this is the neighborhood tomcat. So she's come down, he's come down 2 or 3 blocks, and apparently, no. This is the neighborhood tomcat, and I should remember his name, but I can't. So he moves from house to house down by where I live. And this is community policing at its best. This is community policing. Never seen him down. He probably was over at Drager's house earlier tonight and didn't get fed.
That's something you don't see every night in a council meeting.
I was like, what is that meowing noise? That's totally a cat. Okay.
All right.
Sorry, back to your very serious comment, Dana.
I'm done, thank you.
Thank you. No further discussion? Councilperson Babcock?
Just one thought. I've been an owner, I've been a renter, and with a 2-person rental, I mean, it could be mosh pit, diving, heavy metal. I'm probably stereotyping about the heavy metal people, but that's generally not a quiet music source. Or they could be the 2 most boring people in the world, like the much better half and I say that with a certain level of pride. You just don't know. One of the influential things for me, though, is as I read through the packet, several neighbors for both properties have taken initiative to write to us, and that is influential to me. I mean, certainly we've got the legal considerations, but when someone takes the time to write a letter, I think there's a reason that's part of the public process, and I think that's worth listening to. But it's a tough call, because I say with my friends, we are but one divorce from not being East Lansing residents anymore. It's tough to rent here, and it's almost impossible to buy a house here. So we need to look at some long-term solutions, and hopefully the housing study will come back before us sometime soon. That would be beneficial. Thank you.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries 3-2. On to formal item 3.9, new item 5.6.
Move we approve an initial rental license application for 755 Berkshire for a conditional Class 3 rental license, allowing up to 2 unrelated persons or a family to occupy the dwelling.
Second.
Moved and seconded.
My reasons for opposing this are precisely the same as the reasons I stated on the last one, and I adopt those reasons specifically for the record.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries 3-2. On to item 3.1, approval of a letter supporting the reduction of consumers' energy, carbon, and greenhouse gas emissions. Now item 5.7.
I move we approve a letter supporting the reduction of consumer energy's carbon and greenhouse gas emissions.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion?
I would just like somebody to explain this to me. So I think it's 125 of the packet. And here's what I don't quite understand, and I don't know who it is that's going to explain it to me, but so we received 2 things, both last meeting and I think this meeting, and had a little presentation, I think, last meeting. And so there's a document called U21090 Consumers Energy Integrated Resource Plan, which I guess is an informational thing from somebody, I don't know exactly who. And then there's attached to that a separate letter which we're asked to sign as a group to the Public Service Commission. And so here's what I don't understand. So in this U21090, it talks about an integrated resource plan, and it talks about consumer energy's IRP includes the following: becoming coal-free by 2025 by retiring J.H. Campbell plant units 1, 2, and 3. And then it makes comments about the environmentally destructive portions of that plant. And then it goes on and talks about an alternative plan on the page 2 of that. Is there an alternative plan that addresses affordability and reliability, and apparently implies that the Consumers Campbell plant closing is insufficient because Consumers is going to buy some energy for a while from somebody else. And then the letter talks about shutting down the Campbell plant by 2025, which is, I think, what Consumers has already indicated it's going to do. So I don't understand the other document. I don't understand if we're somehow objecting to the Consumers plan before the commission, and because I don't. I'm in favor of the Consumers plan, but I can't tell if somebody's suggesting here that we should not be in favor of the Consumers plan.
So the first sheet, that's headed U21090 Consumers Integrated Resource Plan, those 2 pages are a fact sheet about the integrated resource plan and what Consumers is asking for of the Public Service Commission. So the Public Service Commission has an opportunity for the public to weigh in on these plans, and the public very rarely does. So the Commission on the Environment was working on this, and discussed this. They discussed, they support sending the attached letter. And the attached letter is probably opposing mostly opposing what Consumers Energy is doing. They're asking them to go further. They're asking them to go further and shut the Campbell plan, to make sure the Campbell plan is shut. This policy statement is consistent with the City of East Lansing's environmental goals, and certainly has been vetted by the Commission on the Environment and approved. So,
I mean, are you telling me that Consumers Plan doesn't say that it's going to shut the plant by 2025?
Consumers is saying that it's going to become coal-free, yes, coal-free by retiring the Campbell plant. However, this letter goes on to describe, well, this goes on to say why it should be done. And, all right, I'm sorry, it's late.
No,
yeah.
Can I interject? Is this like just kind of pro forma? I think the city manager had something.
Yeah, I just was going to say, I thought that this was also in line with what Consumers Energy was doing, and it was simply supporting their activity to the Public Service Commission. And the end remark of the letter says, in closing, we ask you to require Consumers Energy to close the Campbell plant by 2025. And I think that's probably the best summary of what they're asking for. So,
Thank you.
And do we still have a representative on the board of Water and Light, a non-voting representative?
I don't know currently if we have a position on the Board of Water and Light. Who is it?
I thought it was Vic Loomis.
That's news to me. Okay.
I didn't hear you.
I thought that Vic Loomis was our representative on that board, but I'm not 100% sure. I shall Google it.
But that would be different
And of
for
course, it's
consumers.
Oh,
I'm
consumers.
sorry. Yeah,
Oh, I
never
thought,
mind.
no, he was the Board of Water and Light,
Big
sorry.
power company, big power
Yep.
company.
Yep,
This is a
sorry.
really big one.
I'm sorry, it's late, guys, sorry. The city manager is correct, and the first 2 pages are an explanation of what the integrated resource plan is and does, and why it is important to participate. And then the nutshell is a request that we support Consumers' plan to shutter the Campbell plant by 2025. Thank you, City Manager.
Where did these come from? Where did this come from?
The Commission on the Environment, but I'm not sure. I thought it was initiated by
A third party.
a third party, but I thought it was in line with what Consumers was looking to do anyway, but I could be mistaken about that.
If I may, it was the Natural Resources Defense Council. A member of our Commission on the Environment is a staffer there, and also the Commission on the Environment had a presentation from an NRDC staffer. This is generally circulating among environmental groups that monitor the Public Service Commission activities. And this may be one of the rare moments when they align, and what Consumers Energy is asking for comment on actually matches the commentary that would come from many of these groups.
Seems pretty straightforward. Just in comment, if I have any reservations at all about this, I do, in my gut, always concerned about things around energy, particularly when we're in what could be considered an energy crisis, and making sure we're considerate. It's often easy to speak to things that will change energy dynamics and that type of thing from positions of, it can be a position of privilege, and it's something you have to be cautious of, even unintended consequences when discussing even energy policy, because it's very complicated. And I'd say a lot of what's going on around the world and locally is energy policy playing out in real time, and what it does to families and budgets and everything else. So I just want to acknowledge I'm not big on pro forma stuff, particularly when commitments have already been made to do things. And I think sometimes, just honestly, that's privilege. I don't know if we always look at it like that, but just keep pointing that out.
And I appreciate that. So consumers has to go through, I mean, any rate change has to go through the Public Service Commission. It is not the review that it used to be. To be honest, it's that changed in about 2008. And critics of the Public Service Commission or the current regulatory regime in the state of Michigan would say, we don't have much regulation and we don't have a free market. So that is always very much a factor. However, another factor that consumers would take into consideration is just the cost of operating this plant. So they wouldn't propose closing it if it wasn't in their best interest to do so as well. They can't just close a plant without regulatory approval, just as they can't just open one without regulatory approval. Consumers is also, a few years ago, consumers made a big jump for this region in committing to environmental and green energy sources. So this is part of its long-term plan.
Yeah, supportive of the environment. Just, I know consistently sometimes in corporate decision-making, the real cost is passed along to the end user, and the most vulnerable people end up being the end user who pays the brunt of that cost. So it's in the back of my mind.
Right, and they certainly have captive customers. You can't just go. So that's been a huge factor for 20 years in Michigan.
We probably can't move this corporate giant, so I'll just move forward with all those in favor.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-1. And with that, meeting adjourned.